Greetings, this is the Questing GM. So it has been quite a while since my last reflections video for the Star Trek Avengers First Response campaign. So the long story is, as you may already know, we have lost a member. And I had to take down some of the videos that were showing faces of that member. So part of the reason why he left the group was for some privacy concerns, and I had to reconsider my approach to doing these reflections video, especially the commentary videos that involves the entire length of the sessions that we play. So I had took some time to think about it, and time was also another factor in that. Real life concerns has gotten very busy as of late. Uh, and so it was difficult to juggle between making time to sit down and commentate on an entire session, and almost 2 hour session on average, and also making a short reflections video after that. It was even more difficult because I did not have a decision on what I was going to do on with my reflections moving on for the group and for the campaign. But I've eventually passed that threshold. I think I've made a decision for now. Whether I'll change that decision later on would be subject to circumstances. But for now, I think what you will be seeing from me in terms of reflections for the Star Trek Avengers First Response campaign is that I will be doing these reflections video on an episode basis. Very much in vein with what Adept Play is doing, as well as Runeslinger will be doing. Part of the reason for that is because of time concerns. Obviously, it takes much less time and much less concentration or willpower to do this reflections video on a shorter basis, as well as less frequent, and probably also gives me a lot more to talk about for an entire episode, to reflect on an entire episode, rather than to trying to find minute details to talk about in every session. Whether I would go back to making commentary videos, it's going to take some time for me to consider, because especially for this particular episode 1, after the pilot Questions of Duty, because there's that involvement of the player who left. So I'm not very comfortable in doing commentary videos while the player was still with us, and then continuing on making commentary videos when the player is no longer with us. So that's going to be something I will have to rethink and reconsider. It may be more conducive or more comfortable to be doing commentary videos in for new episodes. But then again, as I said, time considerations is probably the main factor at this point, more than the people that were involved in them. On to the reflections for episode 1 of our Star Trek Adventures First Response campaign, which has been titled by Runeslinger, our GM, as Questions of Duty. So as you can hear from the title, there is a certain theme to the adventure in itself. And in the mission for this case, the Avicenna was initially sent on a mission to help with famine and some disease-ridden planet, but then we was sidetracked to deal with another situation and the crisis that was happening in the Helena system, where we was tasked to find a missing dignitary on from the planet of Elas to the planet of Troyes. This is obviously a callback to the original series episode of Elan of Troyes, I believe. So our setting with this mission is after the events of that episode, and it turns out there's actually quite a number of aftermath that had to be dealt with between the two planets in order to secure peace among them. I'm going to be taking this reflections video format a little bit different than how I did previously, because obviously the format has changed and the content has changed, and the things to talk about has changed. So I will first start off with talking about my character Yang, Ensign Yang, flight control officer for the Avicenna, and what was he up to for that and for the duration of the episode. He actually had a pretty good start, I would say. He had he had he had a scene in the cafeteria where he had to deal with some detractors or among the crew, uh, particularly in regards to his uh, con skills, on the bridge. And this was tied back with his failure to communicate the unpreparedness of the weapon system back in the pilot episode when the Romulans and then later on the Gorn turned out, and the Avicenna was actually caught without its weapon systems online and active. So this was a sort of a test, a trial by fire in terms of gaining recognition or acknowledgement from from the crew of the Avicenna. And do bear in mind that Ensign Yang was the new recruit on board the ship, although he was elevated straight to a position on the bridge as flight controller. So there seems to be some insinuated attack on his privileges as a member of a certain respectable family in Starfleet, and therefore his position on the bridge may not have been earned as proven by his somewhat lack of skill. Uh, and as Ensign Yang, he I had to really take that into consideration about his position on the bridge. But I was quite happy. I did build Yang to be in the sense that he was good at what he does. He may not have necessarily came out top of the class, although that would not have been too far or beyond his reach or capabilities. There is some implication of excellence in his career as I built him, and he owed the family privileges or the respectability of his family was more of an edge or a bonus that comes along with his skills, not necessarily a product of his privileges. So Yang in that situation was he had to defend himself. He had to defend himself based on his own merits rather than using his peer pressures or capacity to use peer pressures. And I think one of the saving graces for Yang in that situation was his knowledge of Starfleet protocol, which is one of his focuses. I quite remember making Yang someone who adores or has a lot of respect for Starfleet, and part of being a member of Starfleet is actually a moment of pride, a point of pride in Yang's values. It's a family tradition in a way, and therefore I felt that I've built Yang to be someone who takes a lot of pride in his capabilities, who takes a lot of pride in being a contributing member to Starfleet, who takes a lot of pride in his achievements in Starfleet rather than someone who is rides the escalators of rank that most other people may think he is riding on. But I didn't make Yang that way. And so I think that was a moment for that contention to shine for Yang. That the way he handled the showdown, the way he argued his position, that he was not someone who enjoyed any sort of privileges, and commanding respect that he's no pushover as well from what was then found out to be fellow recruits rather than one of the more experienced crew members of the Avicenna. He was dealing with someone of his rank and level and somewhat of his level of experience. So on that grounds, then Yang is never good. I don't think Yang is going to ever yield that respectability that he thinks he has earned, and he doesn't really ask for a lot. But he is not going to take any sort of insult laying down, especially from someone who could have done better in some sense. So I think that was the main development I experienced as Yang, and later on, much in as you know, as the episode went on, Yang actually, I think, on several occasions proved his flight control capabilities. Not necessarily in the slower parts like searching for the missing ship and establishing search patterns. Those are the skills that he actually failed, and almost on tune, that he would fail some of the more extensive tasks in a way. But when it came to action, with the appearance of the Gorn ship, and with orders to disable it and to prepare the Avicenna for combat, I think that's where Yang really shined in terms of his character capabilities, as well as his character himself. That this is, in a way, I guess this is what he was meant to do on the Avicenna. Uh, in a hostile situation, you can count, the Avicenna can somewhat count on Yang to perform, and I think he's done that. In terms of what I'm hoping for Yang out of this after this episode is that he's trying to get more respect, uh, and recognition, uh, for what he has done for the ship, rather than for why he's on the ship. Uh, and you know, episode 1 is really just the start of things happening, and in some sense, I guess maybe he has already had some experience since the pilot, so he probably has some time to mingle with the crew, and maybe doing some other missions on the side with the ship, that his skills are slowly emerging, but hasn't necessarily been proven yet until this episode. And hopefully that Yang would continue to be able to show his capabilities beyond episode 1, maybe when we go into episode 2, and beyond. So that's on Yang. The next thing I want to talk about is my reflections of the episode, Questions of Duty, as a player. So as a player, it started off, I would say, rather slowly, but I guess for good reasons, because it was a mission that had a lot of questions, and it had a lot of asking, and we needed more information. And true enough, the mystery sort of unravels itself slowly, bit by bit. uh, and I think the thing that sort of uh, caught me off guard, because I was so focused on the reference to uh, Elan of Troyes. I had not paid much attention or focus on the Orion's presence and the implication of the Orions in this plot or crisis, and the role that they play. We were looking for Klingons very early on. We were suspecting the Klingons very early on in the involvement, but it turns out that the main culprits were actually the Orions, and it didn't occur to me that the Orions were capable of certain levels of subterfuge and disguise, to try to cause, certain political unrest or instability in a particular system. Uh, until I went back and watched a couple of episodes where the Orions made an appearance in the original series, and I believe it was both in season 1. Uh, Journey to Babel was actually probably the more uh, exemplary episode that show how the Orions were actually very keen or very prone to doing this sort of activities, and yeah, how they do things really showed their hand in the involvement in this episode that we played. It was pretty much an Orion working behind the scenes, was an Orion plot, so to speak. Although the Klingons probably had a hand in it, but not as much as the Orions did. That came into a bit of an impasse for me when I was playing the scene of Captain Tilek, and with the Orion holding hostage, because I had not thought of this idea that first of all, the Orions were disguising themselves as Trojans, because of the same skin color. But Orions, if you watch the episode of Journey to Babel, you will have seen that the Orions were actually capable of putting on, even very cosmetic disguises that literally just change their physical appearances altogether just to get onto their mission. So uh, I thought I was playing Tilek as Tilek would have uh, done, but I was not aware of the implications of an Orion on the mission, that they were pretty much ready to die, and in most cases their missions are are most likely suicide missions. So that scene where he was trying to negotiate with the Orion, and you know most likely costing Koshakov his leg, was something as a player, I think it was my not connecting the dots properly, was the one that sort of put me a bit on the back foot as to what was really happening, and not realizing it much after, until the episode I think was over. uh but as a player, I'm still quite happy with the episode as a whole, because I get to develop Yang very early on in the first session, and then I got to play Yang as the flight control officer, as he should be in the following episode. So I was not too worried about not Yang not having the spotlight back after that first session. Yang, I mean, Yang still did quite a bit, I feel, and I still get to play. I believe I still managed to play some of the other characters, but the the moment, or the one that made me less satisfied, was probably how that scene with Tilek turned out for me as a player. Part of the intentions for playing Tilek that way, as I mentioned before, as I mentioned in the session, was this was supposed to be that uh, cross conflict with Koshakov. That Koshakov is telling Tilek what to do, and he's because that's what Koshakov thinks is the right thing to do. But Tilek sees a situation much very differently from Koshakov. So I'm actually not very surprised, or I'm sort of expecting or anticipating that particular scene, where Tilek decided to negotiate with the Orion and failing to do so, and costing Korsakov's leg. It's going to be maybe some sort of contention or drama that will come up much later on, maybe in a different scene, or maybe in a different episode entirely, or maybe even several episodes down the road, where that contention comes up again, and both Tilek and Korshakov will have to sort it out. Like, was that the right thing to do at the time? Was Korshakov going to accept his reasons for doing so? Is Tilek going to be able to convince Korshakov that he was trying to do the right thing as the captain, and therefore he should be respected as the captain of the Avicenna? If he even still gets to be the captain of the Avicenna is also the other question that comes in mind. So for the last part of this reflections, I think I want to talk about the game, not as like how the game went as the sessions, but more like the systems and the mechanics and the involvement of rules and all that. Because this is the first episode that we used the ship combat rules, it was a pretty trying system. I had to do a lot of homework, reading up on it, but it was still not necessarily easy to paint a picture or simulate a situation, until you get right down to the weeds and it actually happens in the session, and then that's what happens. I think I've got an idea of the flow of the system, of how ship combat should work, but it's definitely something that you need a lot more practice. You need, after you've experienced a few more situations, then you will have a better. I think I will have a much better, broader understanding of where the cogs are, and where the levers are, and what buttons can you push, and why you when and strategize your resources on how to push those buttons to certain effects. The other interesting aspect to that was also the communications with the other group members. That how do we strategize our ship combat decisions, because it's not something that it's personal combat and ship combat but personal combat is more like an individual decision, whereas a ship combat involves a lot of committee decision making. It has to be an agreeable thing unless there's a captain that is calling the shots quite literally. Any episode that opens up a new aspect of the rules to me is always a good episode in general, because that just means we are getting much deeper into the rules. I believe this was the episode where I started having a bit of an epiphany in regards to momentum and threat, and how we can be used uh, as a player, as not necessarily the benefit of the characters, but more as a tool or a collaborative device with the GM to try to make a better story in that sense. And I think with the episodic nature of the campaign, I think that collaboration is pretty vital in sustaining the drama, so to speak, for every episode, and for the rest of the campaign. I feel the sessions as they went on beyond the first, it may feel like Yang and myself as the player is not getting a lot of action, but I can quite assure you it was actually quite enjoyable to be in the session, watching things unfold, whilst you being able to support things relatively from the side, but still an enjoyable session as a player. And things turn out, I would say, pretty enjoyable at the end of it. Uh, the if there's any closing thoughts I could give, I guess it was the pretty last minute exposition that we had about the entire plot of the Orions. Uh, I wasn't feeling sure that if it was something that we could have discovered beforehand, like if we did ask the right questions, so to speak, if we looked at the clues from a different angle, so to speak, could we have found out about those that amount of treachery among the Orions and the Trojans, and how they affected the Elysians. Uh, so it may have felt a little bit like we were shown the entire cloth at the end, uh, while we were pulling strings and threads right early on, but never getting right to the actual cloth piece itself. Uh, but I'm not sure like where was the flaw in that. Like, was it as players we weren't asking the right questions? Did we push too much thread to get to build up the large picture? Uh, or was it something that the GM decided to weave in much later on, and then only for us, using the thread that we've given him, and trying to conclude the episode with a rather convincing uh, explanation to what was all happening. So I guess that's all for now. For Questions of Duty, uh, I would definitely encourage you to be watching the sessions, the full sessions, in regards to some of the points that I've made here, because some of them are like like the cafeteria scene would definitely happen in the first session, and I think you can see the actual play out of the ship combat rules, I think, in the fourth session, the final session. And 2 and 3 sessions is a lot of the searching part, and that has some interesting rules being played out. I believe was the extended task rules. There's a bit of a learning value there. It's the sessions are still worth watching through, and then listening to the reflections made by Runeslinger as a GM, and Braun from Adapt Play has his own reflections on the episode in itself, and then there's mine. So I'll be back very soon with the next reflections video for episode 2, which is the third episode in the campaign so far. So I'll see you there.